So, I've been a pizza delivery person for a decent amount of time, and I usually get stuck with a crappy shift of 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. I live in a pretty small city out in the boonies, so there's only like one murder per year in our area. Well, last month there were 3 back-to-back murders, and we as drivers keep on that stuff. But hey, we average out pretty good for just driving around the city all night, so it wasn't anything to get too worked up about. Anyway, it was probably around 1 a.m., and there was only me, another driver, a cook, and our manager who's in his mid-20s. He's really cool and understanding because he had been a driver in his teens. We were all finished with all the cleaning and stuff like that because it was an unusually slow night that night. Then we finally got an order. I was the so-called lucky one to get to take this delivery down the dirt road in the middle of nowhere. I personally had never delivered to that area, but it was about 10 miles away from where I lived, so I knew there was only going to be about 5 houses on that lonely 4 miles of road. I put the pizzas in my car and started on my drive. I had just put in 2 12-inch subwoofers in the back of my '99 Honda Accord to complete my white trash look, but they weren't secured in there, and being an unkept dirt road, I was driving pretty slow. My GPS told me I had arrived, but it was about a mile off, so I turned down the subs and pulled up to what I believed to be the house. Our boss has a thing about never pulling up in the driveway, no matter how much of a walk it is, and this was one of those times that I thought I'd actually do what he says. I grabbed the pizza and receipt and walked up to the door. It was a long driveway, and what sucked was they had the audacity to leave all the outside and inside lights off to the house. Probably just watching a movie, I thought to myself, as it wasn't this unusual this time of night. I got up to the door and knocked. Nothing. Great, a 10-mile drive here for nothing. I knocked again and again. I started to get uncomfortable, and that's when I heard the quiet sound of someone or something walking. It was coming from around the side of the house that I couldn't see. I was getting a bit unnerved and decided this was a great time to start heading back to my car. I didn't want to go back empty-handed, though. When I got to the safety of my car, I decided to ring up the person and see if they were just asleep. I was probably just imagining the footsteps or mistaking them for the creaking of the old house. No answer. I decided to balls up and head over to the door one last time for one final knock. So I put my phone on flashlight mode and walked up to the door. One more knock, and nothing. This time I heard the footsteps again, and I turned my light and saw a man wearing some sort of werewolf mask. I bolted to my car with him closely on my heels, but it was obvious that he wasn't the fastest man out there, and I easily made it to the car with time to spare. I threw the pizza in the car and floored it, almost hitting the man with my car. I called the police, and it turned out that while yes, this call had been made from inside their house, the actual residents were out of town. This was only a few days ago, and they haven't found the guy. I included a picture of the house for all to see. I was parked by the red, and the yellow indicates where the guy was. I still wonder if this man was part of the murders in our quiet little town, but whoever that was, they probably weren't in it for the pizza. On a lazy Friday night when I had the house to myself, I was chilling in the living room with the lights off, watching movie after movie. It was past like 10, and I had a craving for pizza, so I ordered a pie from the local late-night pizza place. It was a rainy night, part of the reason why I chose to just stay in and watch movies. Ironically, I was watching some scary movie at the moment, and at some point during that, I heard loud steps coming up the front stoop outside. I waited for a knock or the doorbell, but when I didn't hear either, I muted the TV out of curiosity. I then went to the front door and quietly lifted the slider above the peephole to look out at who could be on the porch. I was expecting to see the pizza guy, but at first, all I thought I saw was black. It took me a few moments to realize that I was looking back at someone's eye pressed up on the other side of the peephole. I basically leaped back from being startled. I called through the door asking if it was the pizza guy. A deep man's voice called back, "Yes, it is." But something wasn't right. I looked through the peephole again, and now it seemed like the man on the other side was covering it with his hand or something. I didn't know what to do other than yell, "Why are you covering the peephole?" He didn't respond to that. Instead, he just knocked on the door. I yelled at him to please leave, and I walked away from the door back to the living room. A few moments later, the doorbell rang. I heard the same deep voice yell, "Pizza, open up!" I once again got up and went to check through the peephole, but he was still covering it. I shouted at him again to please leave or I'd be calling the police. Now, I turned off the TV to allow for total darkness in the house. All I could hear for a while was the sound of the pouring rain outside. When I went back to the front door to look through the peephole once again, now I was able to see through it. The man was no longer on the stoop. I called the pizza place and asked the guy who picked up the phone if he could check if the delivery driver had arrived at my house yet. I of course explained what was going on and why I was asking for that. He said he'd give the driver a call and then call me back. So I hung up and waited like 2 minutes. The guy called me back to tell me that the driver had not yet arrived at my house, and he suggested that I call the police. He also said the driver would call me when he arrives. I thanked him and hung up the phone. Next thing I remember was hearing knocks from the backyard door. I felt like this couldn't be happening. I actually felt sick. I crept to the back door, which has a pull-down blind that covers the glass for privacy. It was currently pulled down. This next part I still don't understand. Even though I crept quietly to the back door, as soon as I got there, that same familiar voice said, "I see you there, open the door." Then he tried opening it himself, but thank God it was locked. Once again I yelled, "I'm calling the cops if you don't leave." By a luck of good timing, my phone began to ring, and it was the real pizza guy calling to say he was here. I told him to please come to the front door quickly. I opened the front door for him and let him in. He asked if I needed help, and I begged him to stay with me until the police would show up, and he did me that favor. Police showed up within 10 minutes. Having someone there waiting with me made me... It was an unusually slow night, and we were all finished with the cleaning. Then we finally got an order. I was the so-called lucky one to take the delivery down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. I put the pizzas in my car and started on my drive. My GPS told me I had arrived, but it was about a mile off. I turned down the subs and pulled up to what I believed to be the house. I grabbed the pizza and receipt and walked up to the door. It was a long driveway, and they had the audacity to leave all the lights off. I knocked and heard the quiet sound of someone or something walking. I turned my light and saw a man wearing a werewolf mask. I bolted to my car, threw the pizza in and floored it. I called the police, and it turned out the actual residents were out of town. They haven't found the guy. As I stood there, frozen in fear, my mind raced for a way out. Every second felt like an eternity. I knew I had to act quickly. With a sudden burst of courage, I sprinted towards the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled with the lock. Finally, the door swung open and I dashed outside, not daring to look back. The cool night air hit my face, and I kept running until I reached my car. I jumped in, started the engine, and sped away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't stop until I was miles away, safe from whatever or whoever was in that house. It was a narrow escape, but I made it out alive. Once I was far enough away, I pulled over to catch my breath. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I was shaken, but relieved to have escaped. I called my boss to report the incident, my voice still trembling. They assured me that the authorities would be notified and that I should take the rest of the night off. Even though I was safe, the fear lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was a night I would never forget. I decided to go home and try to get some rest, but sleep didn't come easy. My mind replayed the events over and over, and I knew things would never be the same again. A few days later, I was back at work, trying to move on from the terrifying experience. But then, another delivery came in, late at night, to the same area. My heart sank as I recognized the address. I hesitated, but I couldn't refuse the job. I took a deep breath and headed out, hoping this night would be different. As I approached the house, a chill ran down my spine. The memories of that night came flooding back. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. Finally, I stepped out and walked toward the door, my heart pounding once again. I knocked and waited, hoping for a normal delivery this time. The door creaked open and I held my breath, ready for anything. The silence was deafening and I braced myself for whatever was to come next. So, there I was, delivering pizzas late at night, just like any other night. But this time, something felt off. As I approached the house, I noticed a figure standing by the door, almost like they were waiting for me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. I mean, who waits outside for a pizza delivery at midnight? My heart started racing, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I took a deep breath and decided to proceed, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Little did I know this delivery would be like no other. As I fumbled for my phone, my hands were trembling. I dialed the emergency number, praying someone would pick up quickly. When the operator answered, I could barely get the words out. "There's someone in the house, please send help." I decided to sneak around to the backyard, hoping to find a way out. The night was eerily silent, and every step I took seemed to echo. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound behind me. My heart pounded as I turned around, but there was nothing there, just shadows playing tricks on my mind. Just as I thought I was safe, I saw another figure approaching. My heart sank until I realized it was the real pizza guy, holding a pizza box and looking equally confused. "Did you order a pizza?" he asked, glancing around nervously. I nodded, too shocked to speak. The police arrived shortly after, and the intruder was caught. It turned out he had been targeting homes in the area for weeks. As I handed the real pizza guy his tip, I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief. It was a night I would never forget, but at least it had a somewhat happy ending. I feel a lot better there weren't any other disturbances from that man outside, from the time the pizza guy got there to the time the police left. I went straight to sleep after that. I even went so far as to push my dresser in front of my door, just as a desperate act of feeling safe. Thank God that man left for good. It was a little past 9 p.m. It was around 9 p.m. on a Saturday 3 years ago, back when I was delivering pizzas for this pizza place called Gino's. It was my last delivery of the night, my last delivery at that place ever, actually. Not because my shift was ending, but for reasons you're about to find out. I was supposed to deliver one regular pizza to this house around 10 minutes from the restaurant. I got there relatively quickly because I drive fast. It was a gated property, so I had to park on the street and walk through the gate up the decently long pathway to the front door. There, I rang the bell and waited. No one answered after a minute, so I rang it again. I knew the doorbell was working because I heard the ringing from outside. Finally, the lights in a room next to the front door turned on, so I naturally looked up to the window. There were 2 people looking out the window at me, extremely off-putting and unnerving. As I looked back at them, the front door opened, and a man wearing some pig mask opened the door. I couldn't see his face, but he sounded very joyous for the arrival of the pizza. He apologized for their costumes and said they were having a role-playing party. He told me to come in for a second since it was cold, and that he'd go fetch his wallet. So I stepped into the house, and he shut the door behind me. Then he disappeared into another room. I stepped forward a few feet to get a view into the adjacent room, and the 2 people I saw standing at the window moments before were gone. The man called me into another lit-up room nearby. I didn't feel too comfortable, to be completely honest. The whole mask thing was insanely weird, and the 2 creepy people watching me at the window. Still holding the pizza box, I walked to the other room. As I passed the living room into the room next to it, I was just speechless as to what I saw. There were 6 chairs covered in white sheets arranged in a circle. 4 of them were being sat on by other people wearing bizarre plastic animal masks. The guy in the pig mask who opened the door said, "Come in, it'll just be a moment." I asked, "What are you guys role-playing exactly?" All 5 of them erupted into this creepy laughter, making me even more uncomfortable. The man in the pig mask told me to sit in one of the empty chairs. I looked at him without saying a word. Then I saw someone else creepily entering the room, kind of half hiding behind a wall opposite me. He was wearing a frog mask. I said, "You can just have the pizza," as I started to back away. There was no more laughter, no verbal response. 2 of the people in chairs got up and started moving towards me. So I did the only thing I could think to, and I threw the pizza box as hard as I could at them into the room and ran for the front door. Then I sprinted to my car, and yes, I was chased outside. One of them tried breaking my passenger side window as I hightailed it out of there. I floored it down the street and went back to the pizzeria where I told my boss what happened, that I was basically robbed, if not about to be kidnapped or worse. He didn't even want to call the cops. And with that, I quit that job that night. Against my better judgment, I got another pizza delivery job a few months later, but nothing even remotely close to something this strange ever happened again. Settings. As I stepped inside, the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. The house was eerily quiet, with only the faint hum of an old refrigerator in the background. I called out, "Hello, your pizza's here," but there was no response. The dim light from the hallway cast long, unsettling shadows. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, I heard a creak from upstairs. My heart raced. I turned on my heels and bolted for the door. My hands fumbled with the lock, but I managed to swing it open. I dashed out into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could until I reached my car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Safe in my car, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I glanced back at the house, now just a silhouette in the rearview mirror. What had just happened? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. As I drove away, I resolved to never take another delivery to that address again. Some things, I thought, are better left unknown.